what's up, y'all? And of course, welcome to another alternative factuals video. So today I'm going to be discussing something based on obviously San Diego Comic-Con, some new information that was released, and I decided not to release this particular video, even though I'm pretty sure some people will assume that I would release this a little sooner than the last video, but I'm not going to do so. I decided to release this today just so we can kind of get a feel of what's going on and kind of gauge the situation a little better. But before I dive into any details related to today's video or anything like that, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about this news. How do you feel about the character? How do you feel about Blade? How do you feel about his history? Any questions or any suggestions, anything related to the topic, let me know in the comments below. If you've already been at this on this channel for a little bit, you know that I will answer pretty much every comment that is pretty much put down below. And without further ado, let's kind of jump into today's video. So today, based on the title, and I'm pretty sure you clicked on the video for a reason, we're going to be talking about Blade. And Blade, aka Eric Rooks, that's his original name, Eric. And he was first introduced in the Tomb of Dracula #10 in July 1973. So believe it or not, he has been around for a really long time. Most people didn't realize this until their first Blade Trinity with Wesley Snipes, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the movies. Third one kind of fell off, but let's not get into that one. Overall, Blade is way more important than people give him credit for, and there are several reasons why, because Blade has been a part of several teams. He's been a part of the Avengers, he's been a part of the MI13, Night Stalkers, the Vanguard, the Midnight Suns, the Mighty Avengers, and Avengers of the Supernatural. Now, what I really want to focus on is the Avengers of the Supernatural, the Midnight Suns, and the Night Stalkers. Those are I'm kind of going to dive into the Avengers as well, but I'm going to focus on those simply because it's kind of like a Justice League Dark kind of situation, where some characters kind of bleed over, and especially Wonder Woman in DC Rebirth, she did have her appearance in the Justice League Dark series of comics for a little while. So he is way more important than people give him credit for. He's one of those characters where he helps blend the supernatural with the regular characters that we would see on a regular day, such as Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, even though his current run is a little bit more horror, supernatural kind of thing in terms of the whole one below all. So they're starting to kind of drift off into that category of, I guess, comic book writing. And let's talk about it for a little bit. So the first one I want to dive into is the Midnight Suns. So initially they were gathered, I believe, by Doctor Strange to fight supernatural threats. It was Hannibal King, Frank Drake, and Blade, who founded the detective agency King. Drake and Blade later became known as the borderline investigators, blah blah blah. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, and Doctor Strange eventually manipulates the trio into forming this band called the Night Stalkers, and they combat supernatural beings. And even though Doctor Strange is one of those people who deals with magic, he deals with various different things, Blade in the MCU is very important because he would be one of those characters where he can easily cross over with Doctor Strange and the whole Dormammu mystical creatures, because vampires do have a mystical background in terms of their origin, as well as Morbius, who has more of a scientific background, but also there's a very interesting blending with that, which is why it would work best for the MCU, where you have someone who has a scientific background and someone with a mystical background, and someone who can actually somehow merge those two worlds together. And Blade was actually one of those characters who did that consistently throughout his publication history, all the way from 1973 until even present day, I feel. Now, for those of you who are not aware, the Night Stalkers are actually they made their first appearance in Ghost Rider Volume 3, number 28 in August 1992. So let me talk about this. A lot of people have been wondering, hey, when are we going to get Ghost Rider? I mean, we do have Ghost Rider, the series, I believe, coming out on Hulu, and I don't know much about that, I'm not gonna lie to you, but they did also kind of explore the whole Robbie Reyes situation on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, when you have characters like Blade who've been on multiple teams, who had multiple encounters with different characters, he can be the gateway in order for them to introduce different sets of characters. So because he would have a kind of connection to Ghost Rider, to different mystical creatures or just mystical beings like Frank Drake, ultimately he would be able to kind of lure these characters back and wheel them in, and then he can kind of use that as an opportunity for people to get to know, hey, this is what's going on, this is what they do, this is what they represent, and this is what they're all about. Also, just the fact that he can actually introduce Deacon Frost. Now, if you've seen the first Blade movie, you know who Deacon Frost is, and believe it or not, Deacon Frost was a little bit more complex than the first movie kind of let on, and a lot of people didn't understand that about the movie. And if you didn't really read too many of Blade comics or just have enough of an understanding to know how the characters work, you kind of would think he was kind of a brush off character character, but in reality he was a lot more important as a antagonist than people gave him credit for. So that's one of my primary arguments, is just that Blade is one of those characters who can help tie in a bunch of other supernatural beings such as Ghost Rider, Hannibal King, all that stuff. So that's just him being part of the Night Stalkers. Now let's kind of transition over into the whole Avenger situation. Now we already know the Avengers: Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Widow, all these people. The Avengers roster has like literally switched from several people. You have the Avengers, the new Avengers, and you know, it's plenty of history surrounding the Avengers, period. That's just how it is. And he was a part of the Avengers simply because, one, people don't realize, but Blade is a lot more intelligent than people give him credit for, and he is a lot more knowledgeable than people give him credit for. The way that he learned a lot of his martial arts, yes, he did train, but also he does travel around the world. He has a healing factor. Basically all his wounds will heal overnight. He has prolonged life. He actually ages a lot slower. I don't think his aging is slowed down compared to like Wolverine per se, but he definitely can reach about like, I think 200 or something years old, and then, you know, still be relatively agile for someone his age. So he does have very interesting sets of abilities, and he does have access to interesting sets of information simply because of the nature of his job. Hunting vampires requires extensive research, mostly because vampires live very long lives, aka they're very immortal until killed by sunlight, silver, however the means that they're killed, but ultimately they do live long lives and they do contain lots of information. And some vampires are not as outright obvious as others. Some of them kind of hide in the shadows. They live their lives, they keep things moving, they keep things pushing, and they amass funds, they amass billions and billions of dollars because they have a lifetime that can last for hundreds of thousands of years to amass this wealth. And then Blade has to actually look into people's financial records, look at, you know, the similarities between, let's say, someone's father, their sons, their descendants. You know, he's very intelligent, and a lot of comics and even in the movies, they didn't really show too much about that. You just had to kind of suspend your belief that, oh, he just happened to know where they are, or he just always knows where to find them. But he actually requires a lot of research, and in terms of to do what he does, and I think he would be a very relevant person in the team. And he's actually a really good tactician when it comes to combat, not just supernatural beings, but just overall. Now this is the most fun, I won't say the most fun, but definitely the part that I want to dive into the most, because it ties into not just movies but also the television series Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So Blade was a part of a team called the Midnight Suns, and the Midnight Suns also appeared in Ghost Rider Volume 3 number 28, and this is 1992. So it was a multi-issue crossover with multiple supernatural creatures and titles and all that stuff, and it launched the book's first line, like I said, in September of 1992. But what makes this very interesting is that this book did include Morbius the Living Vampire, aka Dr. Michael Morbius, and we already know him from Spider-Man the animated series back in the 90s. You know, he had a PhD and all that stuff, and like, you know, basically genetic enhancements. Then he actually turned himself into a vampire scientifically, not by mystical means, meaning his heart didn't necessarily have to stop or just cease to beat in order for him to have the abilities of a vampire. Somehow he was able to modify his genes in such a way that he became a vampire by the behavior. You know, he needed blood, well, plasma. He needed plasma to survive, and you know, he was very sensitive to sunlight just by the nature of the side effects of the experiment, and he just so happened to be, you know, identified as a living vampire. But ultimately this does include something that a lot of people are very familiar with if you watch the TV show Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's the Darkhold, pages from the Book of Sins in October 1992. Now I want to dive into this, and then I'm going to tie it together. And the Darkhold, oh my god, a very interesting thing. Now the Darkhold was originally belonging to Chthon, a demonic elder god who was the Earth's first practitioner of black magic. Now Blade could be that key character to tie in Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Darkhold. And like I said, Ghost Rider does exist in the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which does exist in the MCU universe basically. So basically he literally could be the single character we need in order for him to tie events from the TV shows like Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and like the Inhumans, even though that's a terrible show and I would rather them forget it, but I'm just saying for the sake of this example. But he can be that single character to tie all this together. And Chthon wrote this, you know, collective knowledge into iron-bound scrolls that served as the first form of the Darkhold. And it was really just such a dangerous book, because people don't know that humans first found the Darkhold during the time of Atlantis sinking to the ocean, and then this actually spawned events that created the first vampire, Varney. And Varney was basically a vampire in Marvel Comics. He was created by Steve Perry and Steve Bissette, and then it actually first appeared appeared in Bizarre Adventures number 33 in December 1982, blah blah blah, whatever. Within the context of the story, he was the first vampire, and then he created Dracula. So you see, like, basically Blade spawns into several different characters where he could be part of the Midnight Suns, who had a relation to Doctor Strange, who had relations to Ghost Rider, who had relations to the Darkhold, and the Darkhold has relations to Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then also it still has connections to creating the first vampire. So the Darkhold is responsible for creating the very race that he's hunting. And then he would have relevance in that show because at that point he would seek to either destroy the book or somehow see if he can figure out a way to reverse this magical curse. And then he's had run-ins with Morbius the Living Vampire, someone who has had run-ins with people like Spider-Man, you know, people who ran the Avenger. It's literally like Blade is one of those characters where even back in the original trilogy with Wesley Snipes, people did not realize that his character had a lot of ties to various different characters and different story arcs throughout all of Marvel Comics, and he can be the one to introduce multiple different types of stories simply because of his existence and due to the nature of what he does as a superhero overall. But let me not get into it. I think I'm starting to get a little bit too excited, but let me know what you think about this. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. Leave your comments down below, and I hope to see you later on. Peace out.